So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the Community of Scholars. I want to take a moment and think about May. May was Nurses Week, but it wasn't enough for us. We turned it into Nurses Month. So remember, we started with Ivy. Ivy was a keynote speaker. Then Joey has spoken this month as well, representing CGN. Ivy brought in Dr. Porter, I believe, for our Nurses Week Day celebration. Then a week after that, we had the great lunch in this room a week ago. So that was another time that we celebrated. Since then, we have been gifted with the photo of the cohort of students, and it's behind us. And it has been signed by all of our students. That's going to be a very memorable gift that we'll have displayed on the wall. So now we're winding down the month of May, but the theme of Nurses Week continues, and we've brought Dr. Judy Berg to campus today. Dr. Judy Berg is an international scholar. She's from Woodburn, Oregon, which is not too far above Lebanon.
I didn't know Lebanon held the Western University School of Medicine.
So Judy went to nursing school at what is now known as the Oregon Health Science Center. I won't say what year she graduated.
I'll tell you.
She'll tell you, okay. But in 1975, she became a nurse practitioner, and she's a women's health nurse practitioner. She has lived through all the transitions of Planned Parenthood, from women's health services to reproductive rights to family care. So she has been an expert in women's health, such an expert that she has chaired the American Academy of Nursing's expert panel on women's health for 10 years. She term limited out, but she's about to resume because she had a mandatory break, and now she's coming back in as chair of the expert panel for women's health. In addition, she's been past president and past chair of the Fellows of the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. And she's also a fellow of the National Academies of Practice, the FNAP. So she has lots of fellowships, distinguished career of hundreds of publications, grants, research, directing doctoral students. In addition, she's been past president of WHIN, the Western Institute of Nursing Research. So she has that strong scholarly voice. And one of my very first publications early in the career was at her request. So she's been a strong mentor in writing. I've had the privilege of guest editing journals with her, co-authoring articles with her, presenting and gathering lots of great information that advances the nurse practitioner movement. So as we look back and we celebrate the month of May and what we're going to turn into Nurses Month, I thought it would be timely to bring, as we're starting to close the month, with an update on the stewardship of nursing. So Dr. Berg gave this presentation about stewardship, and that was her theme for 1 year for the Fellows of the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. So she's going to share with us what it means to be a steward of the profession. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Berg to our campus.
I want to caveat one thing, and that is he mentioned OHSU. When I went to the School of Nursing, it was University of Oregon School of Nursing. And in Oregon, families align with either Oregon State or University of Oregon, and I'm from a definite Oregon State family. So I went to Oregon State for undergraduate work. I entered Oregon State in the Honors College in pre-med. And the first semester, we had quarters, and I think Oregon still is on quarters, but the quarter system. My fall quarter, I was called in by my advisor. His name was Dr. Pease, and he had an essential tremor. He must have been in his 70s. To me, he seemed ancient. Now I'm nearly 75, and I don't think it's so ancient. Anyway, he looked at me. This was 1962. Young lady, do you want to get married and have children? Well, in 1962, what in the heck did you say besides yes, right? He told me I had no business taking up a seat in the medical school. And I said, well, what shall I do? I mean, I was young, naive. What should I do? You should be a nurse. So I transferred to the pre-nursing program at Oregon State, and that was to be for 1 year. However, I had joined a sorority. And the first year on campus, we had to live in the dorm, and the second year and third and fourth and so forth, we could live in our sorority house, and I was hell-bent on doing that. So much to my parents' dismay, I went a second year to Oregon State University before transferring to the School of Nursing, which was in Portland. So anyway, I had 1 extra year, and therefore I graduated with a BSN in 1967 instead of 66, which would have been my rightful cohort. And I have to say that it was the best advice I was ever given to become a nurse. I didn't know it at the time. I spent a good portion of my professional life still feeling unfinished about not getting a medical doctorate. But when I entered my PhD program, as many of us do, I was at UCSF in San Francisco for that. I fell in love with nursing, and I realized what a gift he gave me, because I practice the way I would have as a physician, but I practice with the underlying philosophy of the nursing profession, and I am so lucky to do that. Plus, nursing is just the place to have opportunities, and all throughout my career I've had wonderful opportunities, which I think if I had become a physician, I would have been practicing in my little niche, and that's what I would have done. But in nursing, I've had opportunities for professional organization work that I may not have chosen as a physician. I've just been so fortunate. So it was the best advice I ever got. And the interesting thing is, I now have an essential tremor. How did that happen? Anyway, so I wanted to talk to you, and actually it's a bit like preaching, about taking care of the nursing profession. It is really and truly up to each one of us to do that. I wonder which way I go. Well, shouldn't it just be able to go forward, Rob?
Right. I think we can.
I am technologically challenged. No? Okay. As an educator, you know, we always have objectives. So I wanted to tell you how many nurses there are in this country, because that's a moving target number. And generally you see it much higher, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics, of course, is linked to working nurses. And so the number, as of May 14th, I think it was, of 2018, the number of employed nurses was 2,900,000 something. And the number now of nurse practitioners is greater than 248,000. Isn't that amazing? When I became a nurse practitioner in 1975, there may have been 100 or 200. And many of us, I was in my master's program at UCSF, and they had started a certificate program in women's health. And I took one course, and I was hooked. So I finished my master's and then completed the certificate program. I received a letter from my certification board, the National Certification Corporation, which certifies women's health people. And they told me I should never let my certification lapse because I no longer qualify to sit for the exam, because it's not a master's linked nurse practitioner credential. It is a certificate. So I will never let my certification lapse. Anyway, what I want to say to you is that it's very easy for us as nurses to get real complacent and not think much about protecting our profession, but we must do it. There are many reasons why we must do it, but each and every one of us is really ethically responsible for protecting the role of the nurse. And I listed here profession/role because, you know, the nurse practitioner founder, our birth mother, Loretta Ford, who's now 96 years old, I believe, said to me a few years ago, because so many of us had started saying our profession as nurse practitioners, we talked about our profession. She said, Judy, nurse practitioners are nurses. So you are a professional nurse in an advanced practice role, that of nurse practitioner. And she said, it's very important for you always to remember your nursing roots. So it's not the nurse practitioner profession. It's the nursing profession, and you are a nurse practitioner. So I try to remember that. In fact, one of the publications that Rod and I co-wrote had that in there to remind us as nurse practitioners that we're nurses. First and foremost, we're nurses. These are definitions of stewardship, and I have been really intimately involved with these definitions because I chair the stewardship committee for the Fellows of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. And we're working on stewardship of the nurse practitioner role and trying to define for the fellows what the fellow's role should be, needs to be. So we're working on this, and it isn't all that easy. There are some real loosey-goosey ones, like the second one, that's from the dictionary, and it's just careful and responsible management of something entrusted to your care. As a nurse, the nursing profession is entrusted to your care. And so it fits, but it isn't really specific enough for some of the work that we need to do. So we've gone further. The last one on this page is more linked to nursing itself and not general. And then finally, for just expanding the role, we're responsible for maintaining the integrity of the profession, but we're also responsible for advancing the profession. And that's important for us to consider, because it's not just what we're doing today as educators, as practitioners. It's what should be in the future, and the ways in which we have to assist the profession to grow to meet the future needs of the population. And, you know, we, as educators, all of you are involved in preparing that next generation of care providers. But you need to develop them and give them the skills, especially the critical thinking skills, that will help them meet the needs of the future, because everything is evolving. You cannot stay exactly the same as when you were educated as nurses. You have to advance your knowledge and your care. The ANA Code of Ethics is really the mandate for all nurses. And in the Code of Ethics, there is a section, there are two provisions that talk about stewardship, not using the word stewardship, but that all of us have to participate in the advancement of the profession. And we can do that in practice, education, administration, and knowledge development. And you may be occupying 1, 2, 3, 4 of these categories, but you must do it in at least one. And the other thing is, really, it's important for you to be articulating nursing values to your students, to colleagues. When you're in a professional role and you are relating to other health professionals, you're representing the profession of nursing. And so it's up to you to be articulating the values of nursing, and you know very well what those are that make us different from medicine, for example, or from physical therapy. And that is, we are all about health promotion despite chronic illness. So we're the profession that really cares for people long-term, thinks about people long-term, and helping people promote their health, besides being in a, you know, even though they may have chronic illnesses. And as you know, many of our patients have dozens of chronic illnesses. And we have to maintain the integrity of the profession. All that's in the Code of Ethics. And if you do not have the updated version of the ANA Code of Ethics, you should get it. It's a very small book, and you buy it from ANA. It's not cheap, though. That kind of upset me. Yeah. I mean, if it's our ethical code, it should be given to us for free, in my humble opinion. Besides, we pay dues to these organizations. But at any rate, the 2015 Code of Ethics with interpretive statements is very useful. And it's something that you can use in teaching your courses. There may be something particularly pertinent in there, relevant to whatever you're teaching at the moment. And your students should get familiar with it, because they too are responsible for maintaining the code. I like to simplify things. I mean, they go through all of these examples of what you're supposed to do, but we're supposed to protect all that's good in our profession and then expand it to meet future needs. So, and I know that all of you are involved in that. You just don't articulate that's what you're doing, but you are. Every time you change your course to incorporate new knowledge, that's what you're doing. What you have to be careful about in educating nurses is that if you incorporate new content, there may be some old that needs to get out. And many of us fail to remember that, and so pretty soon our courses are stacked with content, and making it impossible for our students. But anyway, what are the ways in which you can steward the profession? Well, there are many of them, but these I just took off the top of my head. Professional engagement. Well, the first three I want you to know were coined by none other than your Rod Hicks. We worked together as guest editors on a special edition of the Journal of the American Association of Nurse Practitioners that had to do with professional role development. And so he coined these phrases to kind of group our message. And the first was professional engagement, and the second, knowledge dissemination, and then professional development in addition. But I added policy and quality control, and I spend a lot of time talking about quality control because it's important to me as someone who retired and failed retirement. I want to leave the message of quality control of our profession. So I added those two. So what what is professional engagement and why is it important? And why does that have to do with stewardship? Well, professional engagements are those things that you do that really demonstrate you are committed to being a professional nurse. And the obvious ones, of course, are professional membership. But I advocate for, and will really browbeat you about, is to go further than just being a member. Get engaged, get active, do something with that organization, because it's of great benefit to the profession and a great benefit to you. There's so many things that you get from professional engagement. And networking, I know that you know how important networking is, but I want you to impart that on your students as well, because one of the key ways they advance their careers is through networking. Have them go to conferences and meet the people that are really heavy hitters in their particular area. And what's interesting, when I take students to conferences, particularly my doctoral students, I march them right up to the keynote speaker or to someone I know is really one of the most outstanding contributors to their particular area, and introduce the student, because I want them to start getting comfortable doing that. I want you to be comfortable doing that, because there are so many things you can get from that. Plus, that person, you may be shy about doing it. You have no idea how much Rod likes it when somebody comes up to him and introduces themselves. And, you know, I notice how much writing you do. I really am a fan of this particular article that you wrote. It makes him feel good, but also it gives him an opportunity to really mentor or give some pearls of wisdom to the person who's introduced themselves. And you're open to it, right? You never say, oh, and walk away. Everyone loves it. And if you have read a manuscript in a journal that you particularly are fond of, email that author. Introduce yourself. Tell them how important that message was to you or to what it is that you're doing. You might start a dialogue with someone who might invite you to write with them, do research with them. They might invite you to come and speak to their students. It's really a wonderful way for you to get involved, expand your career, and really assist another member of your profession. The other thing is, though, so many of us in nursing are really so clinically focused that we're not very interested in policy. I get it. I mean, I practiced for 25 years before I got a PhD. I was interested in clinical things, clinical conferences, learning more and more, staying up to date, doing cutting edge work. And I wasn't very interested in policy, but I want to give you some food for thought. When you're a nurse, a clinician, you're doing things with patients one-on-one and making a great difference in that patient's life, right? You can be effective one-on-one, and it's a wonderful thing. It needs to happen. But if you step back and teach another nurse to do what you do, you've cast a wider net, haven't you? You've expanded your skills to other people. But the biggest way you have impact on the health of people of this nation, health policy. You can set the bar for the quality of care that's rendered or the type of care. And that's why in the American Academy of Nursing, we focus so much on policy, because it's a way for the leaders of our profession to affect health policy. It's a very important key place for you to be. And even that, it's kind of boring. You don't have to do it at the national level. It could be right here in Pomona. It could be regional, or it could be statewide, it could be regional. And you can get involved in so many interesting ways. You know, the state of California appoints nurses, oftentimes nurse educators, to boards. Get yourself on one of those boards. Find out how you can be effective representing your profession, but also influencing the health of the state. Or do, if there's a regional board of some kind, get on that. It's important. The other thing we're not very good about as nurses, and you have to get good at, is collecting data about the outcomes of your work. Teach your students to do it. Because if we don't have data, we don't have the power of telling people how effective we are. And there are ways to do this. There's a whole article in our special edition written by Ruth Kleinpel, who's one of the leaders, leading nurse practitioners in acute care in this country. I understand she's coming here. Ruth Kleinpel wrote an article on quality measures, and it's all about this. So pull up that article and read it, and find ways you can educate your students to measure the outcomes of their work. Because without these data, we have no evidence that nursing care is effective at improving health. We just don't have it. And people have told us this forever, and we still don't do it very well. So I want you to. We need it for these reasons, to prove that we provide quality care. And the biggest thing, and I'm sorry to say this because I think finance is boring, if we can't demonstrate how we reduce the cost of health care, no one's going to pay attention to us. And a good example is, you know, when I got my master's degree in 1975, there were no nurse practitioner master's programs, I don't believe, unless Colorado had instituted theirs. But everyone was getting CNSs, clinical nurse specialist credentials. Clinical nurse specialists, about 20 years later, were laid off in acute care facilities. The positions were done away with. But oh, how interesting, healthcare costs went up. So they started hiring them back, and they caught us with our pants down because as nursing educators, we'd done away with a lot of our programs. And now all of a sudden the hospitals and other healthcare facilities were saying, oh, we need CNSs back because they save us cost. Well, we didn't have the data to demonstrate that. It was only discovered when we didn't have CNSs anymore. So we need to constantly be demonstrating to the world how wonderful we are. And we have to have a financial piece to it. Hello, how are you? Good to see you.
Good morning.
So knowledge dissemination, I know that Rod is very good at sort of cracking the whip with you about getting better about disseminating the knowledge that you have, but there are ways to do it. It is an essential responsibility if you are conducting research. and in my mind, I lump research, evidence-based practice together. But what we do know, and this was browbeat into me in my PhD program, is that if you conduct research and don't disseminate the findings, the research never happened, and you have misused your participants. They came into your study in good faith. You told them you were collecting data on a particular thing. They gave you their data, and you don't publish it or you don't disseminate it in presentations. You really are behaving unethically. So you must disseminate. You must disseminate your new knowledge in educational strategies. If you're doing something that's innovative, it's really incumbent upon you to tell the rest of the world about it, to share it. Because if you don't, nobody else knows about it, and nobody else can adopt it. So you've done this wonderful thing, but have done a real disservice to your colleagues and to your profession. So start doing it. And really, after a while, it's just plain fun. So, and we can teach you how to write abstracts and things like that so that your presentations are accepted. And we can help you write manuscripts, because there is a science to it, of course, but there's also an art to it. And those of us who do publish can help you really hone your work so that it will get accepted. It also, if you are disseminating knowledge, it's saying to the world out there, nurses have knowledge, and it's important knowledge, and nurses are scientists. It's showing to the world that we can play in the big tournament of healthcare. And traditionally, nurses have been silent. We're quiet, we go about our work, we do our thing, we do it cheap. And people give more work to us, and we do it without pay increases or time increases, any of those things. We do it because we're nurses. But we have to be out there really demonstrating to the world what we do. And the only way to do that is to get out there and brag about your work. You must do it. It also demonstrates leadership. The people who get out there and really disseminate work are leaders. And they're showing the world their leadership qualities. Now, you probably do some of this work in your classrooms, telling your students about it. But you know what? Just like parenting, the best way to get your students to disseminate is for you to demonstrate that you're doing it. And of course, it's obvious that it will really demonstrate to the world about your expertise and excellence. And other people find out about that. And guess what? You start getting tapped to do things. It wasn't, when I was a nurse practitioner full-time for 25 years, I wasn't tapped to go speak places unless it was to a local audience. Now I'm out there disseminating, and people come to me and ask me to do things. And it isn't just speaking engagements or writing engagements. They ask me to do things like sit on boards or chair a committee or what have you, because I'm out there in their face. They see I have some capability, and that's how it happens. I want that for you, because it's a wonderful way for you to steward the profession, but also to advance your own careers. Now, the special edition Rod and I did of JAANP does have some really good articles in there that will help you with knowledge dissemination. One of them is how to write abstracts. And if you've ever written an abstract and submitted it to present at a conference and it was denied, you weren't accepted, there are specific reasons for that. And this article will help you do a better job of writing an abstract. Rod and I wrote about designing and presenting posters. It's not a matter of just slapping stuff on a canvas. Poster presentations are difficult, intricate, and there's a science behind it. So I think our article is very helpful in that. And then the other is punching up podium presentations, how to speak, how to get your point across, what point should come across, and how people connect and listen to you. And you have to do that at a conference in 10 or 15 minutes, because that's all the time you have. There also is a real professional conduct in and around podium presentations. It has to do with simple things, which I talk about later, not chewing gum, dressing appropriately, using appropriate language. But it's more than that. It's what out of your presentation is the most meat? What do people want to hear? And if it's a research presentation, many presenters wax poetic about their methodology. Nobody cares. Nobody, especially the qualitative people, want to talk about this and that analysis and so on and so forth. People want to know, what did you find? That's what they want to know. And what is the significance of it? Another word to the wise, whenever you're presenting or writing, know your audience and pitch to that audience. So if you're writing a manuscript and it's for, let's say, ICU nurses, you better have a section in there about significance to ICU nurses. Don't be talking about physicians. The journal goes to ICU nurses or critical care or whatever it may be. Pitch to the audience, always. And people make mistakes like that all of the time. The Attorney General of the United States came to FAANP meeting and addressed us. And she spoke about physicians because she's a physician. We're nurse practitioners. We wanted her to address us, not her physician colleagues. That was a big mistake. But somebody hadn't clued her into that simple little thing. Okay, how are we doing for time?
30 more minutes.
Okay. In terms of educational and professional development, much of this you know already, but I do want to point out to you that it is a responsibility of every single nurse to precept others. And it isn't just students you must precept. Like, for example, you might have a doctoral student who is doing those student teaching classes so that they qualify for a nurse faculty loan. It's your responsibility to precept and mentor them. But you must impart this message to all of your students, that it's their professional responsibility. And really, really talk about that, because our profession is in crisis at the advanced practice level, where we have a glut of nurse practitioner students coming out of all of these programs, and our communities only have a certain number of preceptors that we can utilize. Unless you really make your students feel a responsibility to precept, they won't do it. Reason is, it's extra work, right? But it's a professional responsibility. Not that they have to precept everyone who comes in the door, but they must really demonstrate a commitment to the profession by giving back and precepting and mentoring. And you You have new faculty who come. Somebody needs to mentor them. Be one of the mentors. Be there to help them be successful, because it's an important piece of our mandate, our ethical mandate as professional nurses. Oh, I also put in their responsibility to report. And let me tell you what I mean by that. In practice, in education, in administration, in knowledge development, you might observe unprofessional behavior or unethical behavior. As a professional nurse, it's your obligation to see it, note it, talk to the person about it, and perhaps even report it. You may not overlook it. So out in practice, for example, as a nurse practitioner, you might see somebody make a big mistake. You need to point it out to them. You need to report it. It's for the profession and for the protection of the patient. Well, the same is true in teaching. You see big ethical violations. You know what they are. You've seen probably some things. We're ethically not allowed to ignore it. We have to, in some way, address it. And it may only be at the level of reporting it or speaking to the person or what have you. Student cheating. I don't know about your university, but our doctoral programs are only online at University of Arizona. And we had a big episode of cheating. Students were teaming up and taking exams. And the way we found out is that a student would take 25 minutes to do the first 15 questions, but the final 15 they did in 5 minutes. Whereas another person did the first in 5 minutes, and the last one's long time. Well, what was happening? They were writing down answers and looking them up and so forth and sharing. Well, we had to address that. We couldn't overlook that. And there were faculty who really wanted to, because it increases your workload to address it and all of that. I mean, it can be burdensome, but it is ethically your responsibility. So I just wanted to point that out as part of our ethical mandate. In terms of policy, it's really critical that all of us know what policy initiatives are out there that have potential to really impact our profession, both positive and negative. We need to know these things. And how do you know it? You know it from colleagues, but the biggest way is your organizations, because our professional organizations have our backs. And don't make the mistake of thinking the Board of Nursing is your friend. The Board of Nursing's responsibility is to protect the public from you. So don't go to them, don't tell your students not to go to them with practice issues like, I'm a family nurse practitioner, can I do Botox? That happened to one of my students, and they investigated her and found out she was doing some of the cosmetic dermatology procedures for which she was not educated to do. It's not part of the family program to do those things. And the Board of Nursing has protocol for how you expand your practice, your scope of practice. You have to take a course of some kind. You have to have supervised procedures, X number, and that must be documented. So she got into trouble over that. And I don't know if she wasn't there the day I was shouting out about that. I don't know. But just remember, the Board of Nursing is not evil, but their role is to protect the public from you, not to protect you. So get involved by going to legislators. If there's a day when nurses flock up to Sacramento to talk to legislators, go. And by the way, in California, because our nursing organization, state nursing organization, is unionized, the legislators all think that that unionized organization represents professional nursing. And it mostly represents the AD nurses and the non-baccalaureate prepared nurses. And that is not the entire body of professional nurses in the state of Arizona, I mean in California. So it's incumbent upon a school like this one to get active in that kind of work. You don't have to do it all the time, but maybe once a year, once every 2 years. Make that trek, and you'll find it's interesting and fun. You make a fun day of it, and really, you don't get to talk to a legislator. I'm just going to tell you that flat out. You talk to their aides, but the aides are the ones who make decisions and tell that senator or representative how to vote. They're the ones who do that. So go up there and talk to them. Make sure you know what your pitch is, and then go do it. And then if you have a particular initiative that you have adopted and really care about, do it. Work locally. Get people to work with you. Organize. Because that's how we get legislation for nurses. It's the only way. We have to do it. Nobody's going to do it for us. So, any questions about those things? Because I want to get on to my baby, which is really quality control. Because I'm old, because I consider, I get a retirement check every month. I want you to know that. But I failed retirement within 3 months, and they called me and begged me to come back and teach 50%. So I do. I have all these things I won't do. Like, I'm not going to chair a course because the technology is sophisticated, and if I'm not in Tucson soon. Yeah, right. I'm sorry. But I don't want to be faculty chair ever again. I did it actually when the murders happened at University of Arizona in 2002. I was faculty chair. We had 3 faculty murdered. Some of you are not even old enough to remember. But it was a very stressful time for our college. And I had to lead the group through that. We planned and conducted the celebration for these 3 nurses. It was a horrible time. And then I was faculty chair once again a few years later, and I just said, I'm not doing it anymore. Somebody else gets to do it, not me. I don't want to chair a course because I don't do the technology well, long distance. But if you need me to help with teaching, or I have a slug of doctoral students. I think I'm chairing 18 to 20 combination PhD dissertations and DMP projects. Well, we admit 90 to 110 BSN to DMP students per year. So think about how many students that is. It's a huge number. And for women's health, faculty who can chair projects and PhD dissertations, it's an N of 1. So if a student wants to do something in women's health, how in the world could I possibly say no? I just can't. I wouldn't. Plus, that's the reason I'm not retired, is I love those doctoral students. But at any rate, that's what I do for 50% time. But it's made me think a whole lot about the profession and what my legacy to the profession should be. And I call it quality control, but what I really mean is that I want to advance the careers of really exceptional colleagues. And I do that by promoting them as best I can, nominating for fellowship, nominating for scholarships and awards, really helping people submit research grant proposals, helping people write manuscripts, because I want my legacy to be that I have people in positions of leadership because I push them and help them. And a lot of your colleagues won't consider themselves exceptional, but they really are. So if you can just encourage them, say to them, you know, there's a nomination committee opening at the Western Institute of Nursing. I'd really like you to get on the nominating committee because I want you to start getting actively engaged in the organization. And I want to sponsor you for that. Are you willing? Well, I don't know how much work it is. Well, it's not a lot of work, and I want you to do it because you have some leadership skills that the organization could really utilize. And it's a first step towards grooming you to one of those Board of Governor positions. So that's what I want my legacy to be. But do you see how I'm controlling the quality of the profession? I have a hand in that because I'm only tapping the people I know have the abilities and the qualities. And it improves so much about the profession, including the face of the profession, because if our leaders out there are stellar, the rest of the world recognizes it as well. I can tell you that your colleague, Rod Hicks, is well known across the nation and internationally for his stellar work in nursing. And it's because he's gone that route. He volunteers, he's on committees, he's active in organizations, and his name is in print all of the time. That is a wonderful thing for our profession because he is stellar. And now the rest of the world can see that. Any other health profession can look at nursing and see that our leaders are really terrific. Well, you can have a hand in making that happen by just looking around you or nominating yourself for something. We do it all the time. And get out there and start contributing because you have qualities the profession really needs. And we just have to work at that. That's looking at others. But I want you to also be considering the fact that quality starts with you. And all of these things I want you to do. Know the latest, share the latest, teach the latest, practice the latest, and mentor and precept. If you don't like the job you're in, nursing has opportunities for you. And some of those opportunities come through furthering your education. Some of it is just looking around you. But you like it here so much. You want to stay. Quality and practice. If you practice, you better be doing evidence-based practice, which means you're incorporating evidence and the latest improvements in practice. You cannot stay static in nursing. You have to move your practice as knowledge moves forward. And because practice is constantly changing, you have to work at staying up with it. And it is actually extra work. As a nurse practitioner, I have to read and I have to attend conferences in order to stay current in practice because there's always something new. And it's an opportunity to get on interdisciplinary teams because there's great emphasis about that in practice these days. Interdisciplinary collaboration is now key, and funders are looking at interdisciplinary collaboration. If you put together a quality assurance project or a research project, you better have some interdisciplinary players on that team, or funders put you at the bottom of the list or round file your application. When you conduct research or any kind of scholarly inquiry, you really have to have some view into the future as to how the outcomes from this work could affect policy in the future. You have to include that now in your implications for the work, because if you don't, you won't get the level of interest that you need. The other thing you have to put in there is financial stuff. You have to demonstrate that the work you're doing does, in fact, cost save. So they'll always put those things in your scholarly work. And it's important for you to do it when you write as well. If you write a clinical paper speaking about some clinical issue and you posit a clinical solution, you better have these two things in there as to implications for policy, implications for finance or economics. And how do you get active in policy? I said a little bit of this, but you know, the more boards you get appointed to, the more boards you get appointed to. If you can get yourself onto a board or a statewide committee, let's say, those players all get to know who you are, and when something else is forming, they'll say, oh, does anybody know anybody who's a nurse or who has this kind of expertise? Oh, I know somebody. And that's how it works. You have to get a foot in the door. And pharma is not a bad idea for you to get on. We all often think of pharma as the big business model, evil people. In some ways, they very well might be, but without nursing influence, they'll continue on their merry road. And it's important for nurses to be on pharma boards. Plus, they're nice, they pay. You go to these meetings and they put you in executive suites and wine and dine you. It's very nice. They fly you first class. I mean, it's very nice to be on pharma boards. But that's just kind of a nice aside. Why do you do it? It's because we need to have some input into pharma and some of the decisions they make, because it's our responsibility to be looking out for the patient. And oftentimes that's not their interest. Their interest is other, something else, money. And the other thing most of us don't consider is political office. And now there's a big push in nursing organizations to get nurses to run for political office. The American Academy of Nursing is very helpful to members who are running for political office. There's certain things, they don't have money to contribute exactly, but what they do is write letters and are in many other ways very supportive of a person who wants to run for office. I have a women's health colleague who's running for state representative in Arizona, in Phoenix. Unfortunately, I can't vote for her, but I can write letters to colleagues in the area who can. And of course, I can donate if I can afford to do that. What else? Okay, so we've already talked about all of these things, but I just wanted to kind of recap them, the things that you can do to be a good steward for the nursing profession. And now I'm going to just give you some words of wisdom that come from my long career. Don't ever air dirty laundry about the nursing profession when you're in an open forum. Don't do that. We have issues as a profession. You know we do. But it isn't a good idea ever for you as the voice and face of nursing to be out there talking to others about this horrible thing that nurses have done. Don't do that. It will come back to haunt you, and it will haunt the profession. Don't badmouth your professional role, and don't do it here either. You know, my mentor, Nancy Woods, who was the dean at University of Washington School of Nursing, big international expert in women's health, she always said, you should never say anything that you don't want the world to hear. And particularly now with social media, be careful what you write. Just be politic. Now, that doesn't mean you can't complain and things like that, but there is a place for that. Open forums are not the places. And I also want to caution you about being a negative team member. If you're constantly negative, you will not be as successful as you could be. Because if you're negative about something, suggest an alternative. Make a solution. Because being a team player is very, very important to your career. If you are the complainer on the team, you will not advance. Because if I'm picking a team, I'm not going to pick you. Why would I pick you? You're negative. You complain. You're not helping. So be cautious about that aspect of your life. And always remember that as a nurse, in whatever situation you are in, you are the voice and the face of nursing. To your family, to your friends, to your communities, to your churches, wherever you are in a gathering, people who know you as a nurse think all nurses are just like you. That can be a good thing. It can be a great thing. I suspect for people in this room, it's a great thing for the nursing profession. But if you're the whiner complainer, the world will think nurses are whiner complainers, right? You are the voice and the face of nursing. Don't say things you'd be embarrassed to have made public. I already said that. Be helpful. This is another one. Be helpful. Some days you don't feel very helpful. Believe me, I get it. But generally, try to be helpful to colleagues, to students, to whatever. Be helpful. Contribute time and energy to organizations and to the nursing profession. And again, if you identify a problem, please volunteer a solution or be part of a problem-solving team. Say, look, I'm really bothered by the way we do this because blah, blah, blah. Could we try this? Well, then your complaint is valid. It's a complaint, all right, but you have posited a way that it might be improved. Well, that means you're thinking and that you care about your environment, your work setting, your profession. Because whiners, criticizers, and team non-contributors do not advance. Thank you.
Judy, that was awesome. I even learned more than I knew from the first time I heard the speech, and Phoenix about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago
Right.
now. So thank you for sharing all your words of wisdom. I'd like to introduce you to some of our colleagues.
Oh, yes.
Dr. McGradley is our director of our NP program.
Oh,
She is also an emergency nurse practitioner, and she has failed retirement too.
it happens a lot in our profession, you know.
Yes, I did fail retirement. So.
Dr. Lisa Ponsford is on the teaching team for emergency and for primary care nurse practitioners,
Great.
and works at Loma Linda Emergency Room.
Uh-huh. I nearly got a master's degree at Loma Linda because in 1967, I moved to San Bernardino with my first husband, who did his internship at San Bernardino County General. And I worked at St. Bernardine's in labor and delivery, but I wanted to go to Loma Linda. But it was kind of off time, and we were only in San Bernardino a year, so it didn't happen.
And soon to be Dr. Gwen Orozco, a
Yay.
naval expert, so you have a lot in common with
You're
her.
getting a DNP? PhD from?
And she is already taking her coursework, created posters, disseminating. She's won poster of the year for research conference.
Congratulations.
So she is tightening what she's doing in her schoolwork, with her teaching, with her scholarship,
Right.
double dipping, triple
Fabulous.
dipping.
Who's your mentor at Azusa?
Linda Bader.
Boehner.
She is my chair. Linda Bader. And then Dr. Lee is there, and Dr. Vivian D.
Yeah. Great. Well, congratulations. And you're at the dissertation phase?
Yes.
You're writing?
Yes, I'm writing. I've already did my proposal defense. So now I'm collecting data, and it's on women on antepartum bed rest.
Cool.
Qualitative. And she's getting very, very good data, profound data.
That's interesting. Congratulations.
And I'm also labor and delivery.
Uh-huh. I told Loretta Ford if it wasn't for her, I'd still be a damn good labor and delivery.
I can't let it go.
And Dean Lopez,
Yes.
Dr. Donna Manuel, our director of our DNP.
How are you?
I'm good, and how are you?
Health policy advocate extraordinaire. Takes her students to Sacramento,
Good for you.
and has taken a couple to Washington D.C. for the fellows for the AANP policy conference.
Great. And you're FAANP.
Yeah, she is.
And then Dr. Patty Shakshir is our pain expert, director of our MSNE program. She's a palliative care expert in pain.
Wow.
Also
Big field these days, right?
Yeah, fell the news.
And very complex.
Yeah.
Dr. Marcy Horowitz is the director of our health systems leadership and administrative nurse leaders. So it helps create the clinical nurse leaders of the future, the administrative leaders.
Wonderful.
And has the big quality picture.
Do you have a CNL program here? Who are you linked with?
As far as.
Well, with CNL, I thought you had to have a contract or some sort of thing with a facility.
Well, actually, in California, we had to get very creative because at the time the CNL initiative started to advance, our original practice partners all backed out because the state had just gone to mandated ratios.
Mhm.
And so what we do is we train them in place, whichever organization they're working at. And sometimes they are the trailblazers to start the discussion on CNLs within their own organization. And so now California, there's finally enough infusion that you have organizations that actually have the established role. And so some of our students have actually left their facilities and gone to those facilities.
Great.
So, yeah, we had to get creative.
I'll bet it sounds like it.
Dr. Ruth Trudgeon, originally educated in England, came here and is our community health expert. But if you look at her passport, she has the passport book because she leads a lot of our global health and
Oh, wonderful.
and international work, and does a tremendous amount with community health and pediatrics.
Uh-huh. So Rosemary Goodyear is somebody good for you to know.
All right.
Rosemary was here last month. Dr. Debbie Martinez has recently joined us, was previously at San Francisco.
University of San Francisco.
Oh, really?
So I think
Just down the road from UCSF.
And Dr. Ivy Twasson is our Assistant Dean for Global Health and Innovation. So she is big, Dr. Twasson and Dr. Ruth have both just come back from Nepal with Dr. Lopez from India.
Ah,
So we have a footprint around the world.
wonderful.
Joy Dang is soon to be Dr. Joy Dang and will become the director of the FNP program on July 1st.
As Chris tries to retire once.
Yeah, she's flunked that already. It's already July 1st and she's flunked it. And Dr. Walter Penniman helped me with my mental health, keeps me safe. And
Wonderful.
he's also in informatics as well.
Wonderful. Do you have a psych mental health NP program?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's on our dream list.
We're looking at it, but I need to find some funds to hire faculty.
Right.
Our president is a psychiatrist, our new president, and he recently hired Dr. David Burrow, who is also a psychiatrist interested in global health and external and clinical affairs. And so my conversations with both of them are, why don't you have a psych mental health nurse practitioner program? I said, I would love to. Can you please give me $400,000 to hire some faculty so we can make that happen?
Yeah, it turns out, at least for the University of Arizona, it's now our biggest nurse practitioner specialty. I mean, we have a huge family cohort, but a lot of the students are coming in wanting psych mental health. And I think it's because there's such a homeless population issue, and it's increasing in the Southwest. And I live in San Diego, and let me tell you, it is really a horrible situation. In fact, we have a Hep A epidemic because of it. And psych mental health is necessary, and it's not just that we need the providers, we need the resources to make sure these people can get their meds and will take them. There's a lot of them don't want to. But anyway, it's a hugely popular specialty, and psych mental health nurse practitioners graduate and within the year maybe up to $200,000 income. They're approaching the CRNA category.
Dr. Hicks didn't say it, but I wanted to highlight one of Dr. Twasson's achievements, and that was to work with Urban Mission and open up a wellness clinic. Dr. Trajan and Dr. Twasson worked with that group to make that happen. And so we're just starting to make a footprint here in Pomona with the Hispanic community as well as addressing some of those mental health